In the year 2026, I believed I had finally achieved the American dream. My name is Alex Thompson, and after years of grinding in the tech industry, I had purchased my perfect home in the upscale Green Meadows HOA community on the outskirts of a quiet suburban paradise. The house was everything I had ever wanted: sleek, modern lines, smart glass windows, and an open floor plan that flooded with natural light. But the true jewel was my private backyard, a full acre of meticulously landscaped paradise enclosed by tall privacy fencing, featuring a crystal-clear swimming pool, a blooming rose garden I had nurtured for 2 years, a small orchard of fruit trees, and a shaded patio where I spent every evening unwinding with a cold beer and the distant hum of nature. The HOA rules had always felt reasonable, keeping lawns green, houses painted in approved colors, but I never imagined they would one day treat my private property like their personal playground. That all changed on a sunny April morning. I had just returned from a week-long business trip, suitcase in hand, eager to kick off my shoes and relax in my backyard oasis. As I turned the corner into my driveway, something felt off. Strange utility trucks lined the street. The low rumble of heavy machinery echoed from behind my house. Heart pounding, I rushed through the side gate. What greeted me stopped me dead in my tracks. My once pristine backyard had been completely transformed, destroyed, into a sprawling electric vehicle charging station. 50 brand-new gleaming EV chargers stood in perfect rows across my lawn, their concrete pads poured overnight, cables snaking everywhere, bright blue lights blinking mockingly under the morning sun. My rose garden was buried, half the pool deck was ripped up, my fruit trees lay uprooted like discarded trash. Before I could even process the violation, a caravan of luxury SUVs pulled up. 3 HOA board members stepped out in their crisp suits, clipboards in hand, looking as calm as if they had just approved a new mailbox color. I marched straight toward them, fists clenched, voice rising in pure disbelief. The argument exploded right there amid the fresh concrete and humming chargers. They stood their ground, gesturing at the destruction as if it were a gift to the community, while I pointed furiously at what used to be my private sanctuary. The property view from above would have shown the full horror, my entire backyard now a public utility lot without a single notice, permit, or conversation. My blood boiled hotter than the asphalt under the new charges. This wasn't a mistake. This was theft disguised as progress. And as the sun climbed higher over the scene, I knew this was only the opening act of a war I was determined to win. But the real nightmare was just beginning.
Chapter 1. The argument in my backyard that morning was only the spark. The HOA board members stood there with their printed documents, insisting that my acre of private land had somehow been reclassified under a new 2026 Community Sustainability Clause buried deep in the 30-page covenants I had signed 3 years earlier. They claimed an obscure easement allowed them to install green infrastructure for the entire neighborhood's electric vehicle transition, and my backyard was the only large enough plot that didn't require street closures. I stood among the fresh concrete pads, my shoes sinking slightly into the disturbed soil where my rose bushes once bloomed, and felt a rage I had never known. Every charger represented hours of my life, weekends spent planting, evenings spent maintaining, that had been erased without a single email, phone call, or certified letter. I spent the rest of that day on the phone with my attorney, pacing what little untouched grass remained. He confirmed what I already suspected. This was a blatant violation of property rights. The HOA had no right to enter private land without permission, let alone pour 50 concrete foundations and run heavy electrical lines. Yet by evening, the official HOA letter arrived via certified mail, demanding I cease any interference with the new community asset and threatening daily fines of $500 starting immediately. The letter also mentioned that my backyard was now listed as a shared amenity on the HOA website, complete with a QR code for neighbors to reserve charging time. My private paradise had been turned into a paid parking lot for strangers' Teslas and Rivians. Neighbors began driving by slowly, some snapping photos, others whispering in groups at the end of my driveway. A few sympathetic faces offered quiet support, but most seemed excited about the free charging stations right next door. I spent that night on my ruined patio, staring at the glowing blue lights of the chargers, calculating the cost of removal versus the cost of fighting. My attorney warned me it would be expensive and lengthy, but giving in was never an option. By sunrise the next day, I had already filed the first formal complaint with the city planning department and scheduled a survey to prove the land was unequivocally mine. The HOA, however, doubled down, sending a crew to install security cameras aimed directly at my house. The invasion was complete, and the real battle was only now beginning. But the worst was yet to come.
Chapter 2. The fines started arriving daily, each one more insulting than the last. By the end of the first week, I owed the HOA over $3,000 simply for existing on my own property. My attorney filed an emergency injunction to halt any further work, but the judge needed time to review the covenants. In the meantime, the HOA held an emergency board meeting without inviting me and voted to place a lien on my home for unpaid community improvement fees. The backyard chargers were now fully operational, and neighbors were already plugging in their cars, treating my lawn like a public lot. I watched from my window as strangers walked across what used to be my garden, laughing and chatting while their vehicles charged. My days became a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and sleepless nights. I hired a property surveyor who confirmed in black and white that every square inch of the backyard was deeded solely to me. The HOA's response was to hire their own attorney and claim the 2026 green energy mandate from the state gave them emergency powers to repurpose underutilized land. They even circulated a neighborhood newsletter praising the forward-thinking installation and subtly painting me as the selfish resident standing in the way of climate progress. Some neighbors began avoiding me entirely, while a small group started a secret support chat offering to testify if it ever reached court. The stress began affecting my work. I missed deadlines, snapped at colleagues, and found myself staring at satellite images of my own backyard on Google Earth, the 50 chargers looking like an alien invasion from above. Every evening, I walked the perimeter of my ruined property, documenting the damage with photos and videos, the cracked pool deck, the dead rose bushes, the tire tracks through my once perfect grass. The HOA responded by sending another crew to beautify the area with fake turf around the chargers, as if covering up the crime would make it legal. The confrontation in my backyard escalated when board members showed up unannounced to inspect their asset, leading to another shouting match that left me shaking with fury. Legal fees were mounting, my savings were draining, and the HOA seemed determined to bankrupt me into submission. Yet, I refused to back down. The fight had become about more than my backyard. It was about every homeowner who ever trusted an HOA. And the battle was about to explode into the public eye.
Chapter 3. Local news vans began parking along my street by the middle of the second month. A reporter had somehow gotten wind of the story after I posted a single furious update on the neighborhood app. Overnight, my situation went viral. Headlines screamed, "HOA steals backyard for 50 EV chargers. Homeowner fights back." Drone footage of my property, ironically the same aerial view I now hated, flooded every news channel. Interviews with neighbors split the community. Some called me a hero defending property rights. Others labeled me anti-environment and selfish. The HOA board issued a polished statement claiming they acted in the best interest of the neighborhood and had followed every rule. Inside my home, the phone never stopped ringing. Lawyers from across the country offered help. Environmental groups demanded I remove the charges immediately, and even a few politicians reached out. Meanwhile, the daily fines continued to pile up, now exceeding $20,000. I spent entire days in my attorney's office reviewing every covenant page, every email, every permit the HOA had forged or backdated. The surveyor's report became our smoking gun, proving beyond doubt that the land was private. Yet the HOA refused to budge, instead filing a countersuit claiming I had verbally agreed to the project years ago, an outright lie. The backyard itself had become a circus. Charging sessions ran 24 hours a day, bright lights keeping me awake, constant beeping of cars connecting and disconnecting. Weeds were already pushing through the fresh concrete edges. During one particularly heated afternoon confrontation, the board members arrived with their attorney and a news crew of their own, turning my ruined lawn into a live debate stage. I stood my ground, camera lights blazing, while the entire neighborhood watched from the sidewalk. The pressure was crushing, but the national attention also brought hope. Major property rights organizations offered to take my case pro bono. A GoFundMe I never started suddenly had thousands of dollars pouring in from strangers who had suffered similar HOA nightmares. The story was no longer just mine. It had become a symbol. And as the court date finally approached, the tension in my backyard reached a boiling point that would change everything.
Chapter 4. Court preparations consumed the next 6 weeks. My legal team turned my dining room into a war room, walls covered with aerial photos, timelines, and highlighted covenant sections. The HOA's lawyers tried every delay tactic possible, but the judge finally set a hearing date. In the backyard, the chargers continued humming, now with even more cars parked illegally on my grass. I spent mornings walking the property with my surveyor, placing bright orange markers that proved the HOA had crossed every legal boundary. Each confrontation with the board members grew more desperate on their side as public opinion shifted heavily against them. National media had dubbed the case Backyard Bandit HOA, and every new development made front-page news. I received death threats from extreme environmentalists and hero messages from thousands of homeowners. My savings were gone, but the support fund kept the lights on. The night before the first hearing, I stood alone in the backyard at 2 a.m., the blue lights of 50 chargers casting an eerie glow across the destruction. I whispered promises to my ruined garden that justice would come. In court, the HOA presented their case first, claiming emergency powers and community benefit. Their witnesses, other board members, painted me as unreasonable. My team countered with ironclad evidence, the forged permits, the lack of any notice, the massive financial damage documented with before and after photos. The judge seemed visibly disturbed by the arrogance on display. After 3 grueling days, the hearing recessed for the judge's decision. Back home, the HOA tried one last intimidation move, sending a crew to add even more signage to the chargers. The resulting backyard argument was captured by drone and went mega viral within hours. The entire country was now watching my ruined acre, waiting to see if one homeowner could defeat an out-of-control HOA. The verdict would arrive any day, and with it, the fate of my backyard and every similar story across America.
Chapter 5. The judge's ruling came down like a thunderclap. In a packed courtroom, the Honorable Magistrate declared the entire installation illegal, ordered the HOA to remove all 50 chargers within 30 days at their sole expense, and awarded me full compensatory damages plus punitive fees totaling over $450,000. The courtroom erupted. The HOA board sat stunned, their faces pale as the reality sank in. My legal team hugged me while cameras flashed. Outside, reporters swarmed as I stepped into the sunlight, finally able to breathe for the first time in months. Returning home that afternoon, I found the backyard still humming with chargers, but now it felt temporary. The board members showed up unannounced one final time, hoping to negotiate a quiet removal. The argument that followed was the most satisfying yet, me standing tall, documents in hand, while they stammered excuses and promises of quick compliance. Neighbors who had once sided with the HOA now stood silently on the sidewalk, filming the moment the mighty HOA was forced to admit defeat. Within days, bulldozers arrived, not to build, but to tear down. Concrete pads were jackhammered, cables ripped out, sod laid to begin restoring what had been stolen. The financial judgment meant I could not only repair my backyard, but improve it beyond its original glory. I hired the best landscapers in the state and added even taller privacy fencing, a larger pool, and security cameras of my own. The HOA was forced to issue a public apology in the neighborhood newsletter and amend their covenants to prevent any future land grabs. Several board members resigned in disgrace. The story continued to inspire homeowners nationwide, sparking new legislation in multiple states to curb HOA overreach. Yet even as the last charger was hauled away on a flatbed truck, I stood in my restored backyard and felt a strange mix of victory and exhaustion.
The fight had cost me time, money, and peace, but it had shown the power of one determined voice. The blue lights were gone, the roses would bloom again, and as the sun set over my private acre once more, I knew the war was finally over.
Chapter 6. The judge's ruling had delivered a crushing blow to the HOA, but the real satisfaction came in the weeks that followed. Bulldozers and heavy machinery rolled into the backyard once again, this time not to destroy, but to undo the damage they had caused. The 50 sleek EV chargers that had invaded the private acre for months were now being dismantled one by one. Jackhammers shattered the thick concrete pads that had been poured without permission, sending clouds of dust into the air, while workers hauled away the heavy equipment on flatbed trucks. The bright blue lights that had haunted every night were finally switched off forever. Cables were ripped from the ground, metal frames were unbolted, and the entire unauthorized charging station disappeared piece by piece under the watchful eye of the court-appointed inspector. Alex Thompson stood at the edge of his property, arms crossed, watching the removal process with a quiet intensity that spoke volumes. The same HOA board members who had once strutted across his lawn with clipboards and smug confidence now kept their distance, forced to witness the expensive reversal of their illegal actions. Every charger removed felt like another small victory, another piece of his stolen peace being returned. The financial judgment of over $450,000 ensured that the HOA would bear the full cost of restoration, including the complete repair of the damaged pool deck, the replanting of the rose garden, and the replacement of the uprooted fruit trees. No expense would be spared, and the court had made that crystal clear. As the heavy machinery worked through the days, Alex hired the best landscaping team in the state to bring his backyard back to life and make it even better than before. Tall, reinforced privacy fencing went up around the entire acre, taller and stronger than the original, ensuring no future HOA could ever claim an easement or sneak onto the property again. The swimming pool was expanded slightly with new modern tiling and a built-in spa section that sparkled under the sun. Fresh, rich sod was laid across the entire lawn, transforming the scarred and trampled ground into a lush green carpet once more. Rose bushes were replanted in even greater numbers, their vibrant colors promising to bloom brighter than ever. The small orchard was restored with young, healthy fruit trees, carefully selected for the local climate, each one planted with care and protected by sturdy stakes. A larger, more luxurious shaded patio was constructed using premium materials, complete with built-in lighting, comfortable outdoor furniture, and a fire pit for peaceful evenings. Security cameras, high-resolution and motion-activated, were installed at strategic points, all pointed outward to monitor any approaching threats while keeping the interior of the backyard completely private. The entire neighborhood watched the transformation with a mixture of awe and discomfort. Those who had quietly supported the HOA during the controversy now avoided eye contact when Alex passed by. The once divided community had learned a harsh lesson about overreaching authority and the power of one determined homeowner. Several board members resigned in disgrace, their reputations permanently tarnished by the viral scandal that had spread across the country. The HOA was forced to issue a formal public apology in the monthly newsletter, admitting their violation of property rights and promising to amend the covenants to prevent any similar land grabs in the future. New rules were added requiring unanimous homeowner approval and proper legal permits before any major community project could touch private property. The changes came too late for Alex's peace of mind, but they served as a permanent warning to every HOA board across the nation.
National media continued to cover the story for weeks after the removal. Clips of the dramatic backyard confrontations, the drone shots showing the full extent of the unauthorized construction, and the final images of the chargers being hauled away went mega viral once again. Property rights organizations hailed Alex as a hero who had stood up against corporate-style overreach by homeowners associations. His case inspired new legislation in multiple states aimed at curbing HOA powers and protecting individual property owners from exactly this kind of abuse. Emails and messages poured in from all over the country, homeowners sharing their own horror stories and thanking him for fighting a battle that many had lost in silence. A few even traveled to see the restored backyard in person, standing at the new tall fence and marveling at how one man had turned a nightmare into a symbol of resistance. Yet through all the attention and praise, Alex remained focused on what mattered most, reclaiming his private sanctuary.
He spent long hours working alongside the landscapers, personally choosing the placement of each new plant and ensuring every detail matched his original vision while adding thoughtful improvements. The stress that had weighed on him for months began to lift with every bag of fresh soil and every newly planted rose. Evenings on the new patio brought back the simple pleasure he had once taken for granted, sitting with a cold drink, listening to the gentle breeze, and looking out over an acre that was finally, completely and undeniably his. The glowing blue lights of the chargers were gone. The constant hum of strangers' cars charging at all hours had vanished. The tire tracks, the dead patches of grass, and the buried garden were all being erased by fresh life and careful restoration. The financial award covered every penny of legal fees, restoration costs, and even compensated for the months of lost enjoyment and emotional distress. Alex's savings, which had been drained during the long fight, were replenished and then some. The victory was not just personal. It sent a powerful message that no HOA could simply decide to seize private land under the guise of community progress without facing serious consequences. The 2026 green energy push that the board had tried to weaponize had backfired spectacularly, exposing the arrogance and overreach that many associations had been quietly practicing for years. As the final truck carried away the last remnants of the 50 EV chargers, Alex stood in the center of his restored backyard and took a deep breath. The sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold, casting long shadows across the new grass and the blooming flowers. The air smelled of fresh earth and roses instead of concrete dust and electrical cables. For the first time in months, the property felt peaceful, private, and truly his own. The tall privacy fence stood like a fortress, protecting the acre from any future intrusions. The expanded pool reflected the evening sky, and the young fruit trees swayed gently in the breeze, promising future harvests in the years to come. This was more than just a backyard restoration. It was the triumphant end to a battle that had begun with shock and outrage on that fateful April morning. It proved that one ordinary homeowner, armed with determination, solid evidence, and the courage to fight back, could defeat even the most arrogant and powerful HOA. The story of the 50 unauthorized EV chargers in a private backyard became a cautionary tale told in neighborhoods across America, a reminder that property rights still mattered and that no association had the right to treat someone's land as their personal project. Alex Thompson had won. His private paradise was not only returned but improved, strengthened, and forever protected. The roses would bloom again each spring. The pool will sparkle under the summer sun. And every evening on the shaded patio, he will remember the fight that had nearly taken it all away and the victory that had made it even more precious. The war with the HOA was over. Peace had finally returned to the acre, and with it came a deep sense of justice and hard-earned satisfaction that no amount of money or media attention could ever replace. The backyard was his once more, and this time it would stay that way.